chat. Welcome to the UTG show.
The other day we had drawn our 4-hour demand box, right? Drawn from the wick to the bottom of the candle body of the impulse candle. And as we saw, right, originally in the smaller accumulation, and what we believe the thesis, right, is that this is the macro spring. Is that it broke out of this accumulation, right, and it retested prior resistance and support. So it broke through, it rechecked that zone for buyers, and buyers said, "Yep," stepped in, and then ultimately, right, led to new highs. Recent highs about 12.5%, right? Looking left, right, we know this is a hot zone. That it wasn't going to be super easy to break through originally, right? So ultimately, right, we started to see trend exhaustion, and then obviously earnings, right, occurred, and here we are. So we drew our demand zone box, right? We knew sellers were overtaken at this zone, and buyers stepped in. So it's only fair to assume that if we were to drop down into that zone, we would hope to see buyers step in once again, and that was the thesis and what we wanted to see happen today, right? And we did. We wicked into that zone, and we saw immediately a 7% increase into the first part of the day. Now, what to look for after this, right? Well, a couple things. On the macro view, right, if this is the spring, right, we got the V-shaped recovery. Look at the example on the right side that I got here, right? We got the V-shaped recovery, and potentially, right, this is the back test of that. We want to check that previous zone where we marked that 4-hour demand zone box to make sure that buyers are there, aka last point of supply, the LPS. And so hopefully, right, the thesis remains true, and we do get that last check for buyers, and we get that bounce, kind of similar to even this example here, right? You can see that it was rejected once here and rejected once more, right? Because this is a hot zone for buyers and sellers to fight over. So we should expect the same, right? And so looking at RIT, right, it did the same thing. It had this V-shaped recovery. We had broken down. It even left a gap. It created this small accumulation. It broke out of it, back tested for buyers one last time for support. And then ultimately filled the gap, and then obviously it kept tapping right the top of the supply zone. Looking left, it's the same zone, right? Same zone. It's even shaped the same, but regardless, it's a clear zone of interest for buyers and sellers. So you should expect the same battle, right, in the near future here. It's not going to be easy to push through. So, and also, actually, let's get out of that. Just notice this. You actually have this volume wedge, right? Looking at the 4-hour here. So this is something to potentially pay attention to in the next coming days. What I like about this, right, we tested that 4-hour demand zone. We saw big green volume candle, right? Big green volume, big green price action candle. And then the following selling candle, right? Yes, it was red, and it left top wicks, right? Again, this is a hot zone, so kind of expect that. But here's the thing, right? When looking at volume, think of volume as effort versus results, right? Look at these previous red volume candles, right? It was pretty big price action that came down on these candles, but with this one, right, you had a decent size red volume candle, but minimal price action, minimal results. I like to see that. That kind of shows me that buyers are willing to potentially step in even here, which is great. And potentially turning what once was resistance into support, and hopefully launch off of that, to fill this gap, right? We know that we have the macro 236 here. We have the supply box above us that we drew. So we know it's going to be tough to get across this zone right here in the immediate future. But the gap fill is kind of the first priority, and then getting above this is going to be the second tough part, just like it happened on Root. And if this does all come to fruition, right, the macro spring theory with the back test is still intact, and hopefully we can reach those higher targets where we had set earlier. Now, what do we look for on the smaller time frame? Well, so if we look right at this smaller accumulation, this is kind of where I think we are, right? Ultimately, what we saw today, we saw that recovery once it dropped down into this zone. We saw that recovery, and we actually made a higher high, right? It's kind of one of the big prerequisites for an accumulation. You want to see a higher high, and then for the SOS phase, you want to see a pullback or consolidation in this area, right? It could literally consolidate right here and attempt to go up. It could go all the way down to the LPS, right? This was kind of your LPS phase right here, right? You see that little hesitation there. So it could go all the way down to the LPS and then retest that zone once more before trying to make that move for the gap fill as well. So either one of these two possibilities, right, is what we're looking for. If it makes, right, if it makes a lower low, if it breaks this 4-hour demand zone box, then we're looking at, potentially a double bottom, and I really don't want to see that, right? Because then, to me, that signals, A, the buyers that once were here to send this up to 24 are no longer at this area, right? And we did this pretty easily, right? And so if we did it easily in the past and we're failing to do it now, that's kind of scary, right? And like I said before in one of my previous videos, right, even if we do fail that and come down and make that double bottom, that would potentially change the entire structure, right? Because a spring, I don't like a spring to back test the same zone. I want it to back test previous support and resistance, but I don't want it to back test a double bottom, because that opens the door for a higher likelihood of it turning into a redistribution pattern. And yes, you might get a reaction, right? Could react and then hit the 236 and go down. It could even go all the way up to 25, right? And then bounce back down, right? Just like it did in the past. It's done many rounding formations, right? Rounding tops, and then you have a spike, but ultimately it didn't lead to a higher high from the past. It just kept going down, right? All the way from 120 down to 10. So if this is a macro spring, a macro reaccumulation, that's kind of the explanation of why I want to see it go now rather than trying to make a rounding top to the bottom. And so far, we're getting evidence, right, on the higher time frames and even on the smaller time frames, that buyers are stepping in on this 4-hour demand zone. So as long as we consolidate here and fill that gap, and eventually get over this hot 23 to 24, and ultimately 25 is really the big resistance. That is the big thing. It's a clear runway from 25 to 28 currently if we can get above this is going to be the really tough part in what I'm looking at here, right? But in the interim time, right, you want to see that pullback and consolidation. You want to see us find support, and even this last candle at the end of the day here, look at the effort, the big selling volume that came in, and look at this bottom long bottom wick, right? That shows me that buyers are even stepping in right here. Ultimately, you could get some selling follow through and continue down, right, to uh, a further, target, probably 2150 area. But look where it came in from. The previous resistance spot here. It's testing this once again. It's testing this spot again, right? It's testing this spot where it was bouncing off of, right? So it is testing for buyers here, and we're seeing a little bit step up. Like, I understand, red candle, big red volume mean bad, but technically not really, right? It doesn't have to be. There's a long bottom wick and you see massive sell volume, that means they're trying as hard as they can to push it down. There's lots of volume in this move, but the buyers are not letting that happen. They're keeping it up, even if you got a lot of sell volume. So one of two things can happen, right? You then see green volume and green price action, big green volume and big green price action. Or you see more red and you'll ultimately fail after the buyers tried. You need to pay attention to the volume piece, what happens next. Okay, but as of right now, we saw buyers try to fight right at the end of the day. Okay, but ultimately, I want to see this pullback, whether it's right now and then we launch out of this area, or if it comes down a little bit more, whatever. I'm buying this entire range, okay, because I think this is value. This accumulation ranges are where the big dogs start to buy, right? They like to accumulate quietly. They might throw in $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 orders on the dark pool. They're not going to do $90 million, on the lit market like we saw the other day. That's not their style, They might even do $1 million or $2 million, but they're not going to do, tens of millions of orders, right? This is their style. They want to do it quietly because once they break out, as soon as they break out, they are now distributing their position to people in retail and other traders, right? They've already loaded up here, and now they are distributing to everybody else, and it might be the FOMOers, right? Or people that may have bought here and now they want to sell here above the 236 or whatever the case is, right? But this is what I'm looking for in the immediate time frame, right? I would love a bounce very, very soon, and I want to see that gap fill. That's really the big thing that I kind of want to see. I already know up here, that's going to be hot. That's going to be so hot to try and touch. I do not expect to plow through that on the first time. So in the interim, we're chilling. We've already made our positions, or we're continuing to buy, because I don't care if it's $21 or $22.50. I don't care. I'm buying everywhere in here because I like the value here. And I saw us go up to 24 on hardly nothing. So I think we're going to do it again. And I think the thesis is that this is the V-shaped recovery, right, to the macro reaccumulation pattern, and this is the back test of that. We found support, and I want to see the follow through on it, and I want to get to 38. That's the whole goal. So anyways, that's all I got. That's what I want to see in the future here, near term and long term. So thanks.